Hi, Haley and Kelly.
Hello.
Hi, Tika.
Haley, are we going to be signing in, or do we need to indicate that we're present verbally?
I think in the chat is fine, but we'll see what Tizzy says when she gets on. She might want us to call it. But if people, consortium members want to put their names in the chat to get started, that would be great.
Okay, I'll do that. And then I'm going to hop out for a second and pick my son up, and then I'll hop back in. That's why I was asking.
Sure. Thanks for checking. That sounds good.
Evening, everyone. See those of you I can see when I scroll down here. We'll just hang out here for a couple minutes until either we get our quorum or a couple good minutes pass, and then we'll get into the agenda. So thank you to those of you who are here now, and just give us a couple minutes. Nice to see a couple of new faces. I know we have the superintendent's retreat this weekend or these few days, so it's nice to see some new people on behalf of our supers. And Deb, always great to see you. Thank you. Thanks for the reminder, Chuck. Yeah, I think our roll call will be a little bit different tonight, Kelly, because we have a couple of new folks overall. Definitely feeling with the new school year, I'm sure for everyone here. That's certainly for Reading. Let's give it a couple more minutes.
Noelle will be on in about 10 minutes. She just sent me a message.
Okay, great. Okay, I think we will go ahead and get started. We're hovering just below quorum. But I'm sure we'll get some folks later on, and we do not have any significant votes tonight, just our minutes. So hopefully we can get those in at some point when we do have a quorum. But if not, certainly I think we can handle that at some point in the not too distant future. So with that, we will begin as we always do with we're currently doing the roll call. So I know we've got a mixture. It's great to see folks who are in here, member and non-members. But certainly we're getting our roll call and membership in there. And we will skip over the minutes for now. And so welcome back, everyone. This is our first full body Reading Consortium meeting post summer. And this meeting will be, I think a fair amount of just sort of reminding ourselves where we left off when we last met in the wake of the end of the legislative session. And then we'll have the opportunity to touch base with our working groups and see how they're ramping up for the new year. And also, of course, how things are standing. So this slide, of course, is just to remind us that we had our set of recommendations that we ended 2020 with, and of course, spent the spring advocating to fund those as close to as completely as we could through the legislature. And we were able to secure a total of $10 million, some additional additions to the ongoing budget, and then some one-time funds as well for the significant portion of that. So we will talk a little bit, I'll hand things over to Matt in a moment to talk a little bit about the process of allocating some of those funds, but just in terms of reminding folks of the specific items that were generated by our working groups that we wanted to work on. That's what this list here represents. And hang on just one moment, I've got messages coming up in my text. Okay. I do think we have some new members and positions. So while we didn't do our full out loud roll call, I think we wanted to highlight a couple of new members just so some of our veteran members are aware that they are here and that they are among us. Kelly, would you mind kind of running off a list of a couple of the new faces that we have among us? And maybe we can ask them just to sort of say hi so the camera shows them.
Sure. So I'm going to start at the bottom of my list with Xavier Mills.
Didn't see her in my list.
Hi.
Oh, there she is.
Hi, good evening. I'm Xavier Mills. Thank you guys for having me. Of course, I always have to shout out Tizzy super loud when I see her in person. So I'm currently a senior administrator for the state of Delaware's Community Partner Support Unit, which is under the Division of Social Services for Department of Health and Social Services. I don't know if there's like an icebreaker thing outside of my job, but I'm really excited to be here. It's the understatement. So thank you guys for having me again.
Thank you, Xavier. She's an outstanding parent advocate and will be taking on the parent representative role that we had vacant on the body. So thank you, Xavier. We're glad you're here. Go ahead, Kelly.
We have a new representative for Saron-Cade. Oh my gosh, Nick Conselman.
Yep. Hi, I'm Nick Hansman. I'm a senior fiscal and policy analyst at the Office of Management and Budget, and I'm stepping in for Mary Nash Wilson, who was previously on the consortium. And I'm here on behalf of Saron-Cade.
Thank you. And those are the two new representatives that are here right now.
And I know that on behalf of the, I'm going to get the acronym incorrect, but we have the Wilmington group formerly that was focused on the CDC recommendations. And I'm sorry that I don't recall the acronym at the moment, but I believe Hanifa Shabazz will be the new designee from that group moving forward. Is that correct?
Correct. And I think Gwen Angela is here representing Hanifa tonight.
Oh, great. Hey, Gwen.
Good afternoon. Nice to see you all.
Nice to see you all. And we will also have a designee pending for the Urban League as well. As we all know, Eugene Young has moved on in his position. So we'll have news on that soon. But so sorry for bopping back there. My bad for forgetting to introduce our new members. And there being more. We are getting closer to quorum as well. So again, so these were the items that we were really focused on as a body that we saw as some of the lower hanging fruit that we could direct resources to. And is the next slide.
The next slide is work group updates.
Oh, okay. So I will hand it over to Matt then to talk a little bit about the process of allocation for these funds, particularly as it regards the active RFPs and RFAs. Matt?
Thank you, Senator, and good evening, everybody. And if I talk really fast, I apologize. I want to make sure we are respectful of everybody's time. When we had our last meeting in June, the Joint Finance Committee had just made its recommendations to the General Assembly, and as Senator Lockman mentioned, the JFC recommended about $10 million in funding to support our interim recommendations that we had made back in December of 2020. $3 million of that was in the operating budget, and the remaining $7 million was to be allocated from one-time funds. And that was really an extraordinary result. And I know that we sort of celebrated it at the last meeting, but I didn't want to lose sight of the fact as we work through the details of the fact that we went from $0 to $10 million in 6 months for programs that weren't part of a governor's recommended budget. They weren't part of any federal program or any agency budget. And I was telling Senator Lockman earlier that I don't know if that's unprecedented, but if not, it's pretty rare. So I just wanted to again thank her, and I know we have at least one other legislator who's in the meeting today for their efforts, and also thank Secretary Bunting and her team at the Department of Education for their help in trying to get all of these programs up and running now on a pretty short time horizon. The one sentence summary of where we are on the programs that are on the slide is that all the $10 million is working its way right now through the administrative process, whether that's through an active RFP or RFA process or awaiting approval from the state budget office and the controller's office. Because the RFP for the pre-K services was the first one that was issued, and the response date for that one has already come and passed. That's probably the program where we are most likely to see actual programming on the ground first. But we've learned a few lessons even this far in the process that I think can probably help inform what we do going forward in terms of our future meetings. So I just wanted to mention a couple of those things quickly, and then also just give you some more specific updates on the individual programs. One lesson that we've already learned is that it's going to take more than one partial year for us to get a full picture, both of the demand for these programs that we recommended and also what they're going to look like when they're operating at an optimal level. And that's really for a couple of reasons. One of which is that some of the larger recommendations that we made, in particular for pre-K programs and for student health centers, those recommendations require potential grant recipients to actually make physical space alterations or additions that they couldn't make in a timely way in some cases, or that their budgets just wouldn't allow for in the short term. So for example, one of the potential applicants for the pre-K grant told me that they would absolutely be applying for it a year from now, but that they just didn't have physical space available in the short term to be able to accommodate more children to be able to apply for it this year. And for schools that are applying for the wraparound services grant, a requirement of that grant is the existence of a student health center. And for schools that don't already have one, they have to include capital expenses necessary to make physical accommodations to their schools in their first year grant application, which means that they would have that much less money to actually do programming. So these things weren't avoidable. The reason that we made these recommendations on such an expedited basis was that we didn't want to let another school year go by without providing some assistance to these children that we're trying to help. But it does mean that we do have to set our own expectations and also communicate to other people whose opinions are important, that we're just getting these programs up and running, and we do need to give them time once the grants are awarded to mature and to develop. That leads into the second lesson that we've learned, which is that it's really important that we work to have these programming funds become part of the state's ongoing predictable operating budget in future years, because in particular with respect to the wraparound services grant, some of the feedback that I've heard from potential bidders is that they're concerned that they might set up a really ambitious new program only to have the funding for it disappear in the future. And that's been the experience of some of our schools and school districts in the past with other highly visible programs that were funded out of temporary federal grants. And it's a concern that's out there right now with respect to CARES Act funding that the districts are also budgeting. And it not only makes folks, potentially wary about starting new programs, but it also makes it more difficult for them to hire the kind of really skilled staff that we want to be able to have staffing these programs over the long haul. So it's great that we're getting these programs up and running. Really important that they be operational during this upcoming fiscal year, so that legislators can see them in action and recognize their benefit to fund them going forward. But also important for us to focus in the future on making sure that we give them some stability so that schools can rely on them. And regularizing these programs will also avoid the other problem we faced this year with really the misalignment between the legislative and budgeting calendar and the school year calendar. These RFPs went out at a really difficult time for schools right at the beginning of the academic year with a pandemic to deal with on top of that. And again, there was no way around that. These weren't programs that were part of the governor's recommended budget. They weren't part of any budget until the end of June, and they had to be RFP'd. So we did the best that we could under the circumstances, but it's not the way that anyone wants to do business in the long haul. And again, the best way to avoid it is to have these programs become part of a standard operating budget for the state. Third, and I promise last lesson that I'll mention is that none of the programs that were RFP'd are going to look exactly like what we had recommended. Some of that is the result of the legislative process. Once it was clear that the programs were going to be funded, and this is particularly true with the pre-K program, there were people both inside and outside of government who had opinions about how they ought to be shaped. And the General Assembly made changes to all of them in the epilogue language to accommodate some of those opinions. One of those changes, adding a component of evidence-based reading instruction to the professional development program, was something that I had suggested to Senator Lockman in order to try to help build support for our proposals among Joint Finance Committee members for whom that's a really important issue. But there were changes made in all of them. I volunteered to take a look at all of the RFPs before DOE sent them out to try to make sure that they were consistent with the epilogue language from the legislature. And I appreciated Secretary Bunting letting me do that. Mike and Noel have both pointed out to me that I didn't do a very good job of ensuring that the professional development RFP reflected the underlying intent of that group's recommendation, which was to improve teacher retention. The RFP is consistent with the legislature's instructions, but I should have done a better job of asking DOE to explain its purpose. So that's my mistake. I apologize for that. That's not something that's DOE's fault. Hopefully we'll get some good responses anyway to achieve that goal. And in either event, Senator Lockman is going to be recommending to the budget office and to the controller's office that in addition to this RFP that's already out, that we use some portion of our other one-time funds to allow the educator work group to work with DOE during this fiscal year to come up with a professional development plan that's more aligned with the process that the work group had originally described, which was a longer planning process. So one way or the other, we're going to get it right. I have been talking for a long time, so let me just really quickly tick through the specific programs on the slide. As I mentioned, the pre-K RFP has already closed. DOE is in the process of selecting the successful bidders. That should be done in the very, very near future. And the other component of this program is that letters are going to be going out very soon to the families whose children are in the feeder patterns for elementary schools in the city of Wilmington that have the highest rates of poverty, letting them know about the opportunity to have their 3 and 4-year-old children participate in this new program. So it's very, very exciting to see it about to be up and running, and that should be in the very near future. The RFP for wraparound services has a due date of October 8th, which is a week from tomorrow. There's 3 schools that are going to receive grants of about $1.5 million each, and I think that there are 9 or 10 schools that are eligible for the grants. Eligibility is based upon the percentages of children enrolled in the school who are classified by the department as low income. As a reminder, those grants are going to allow those schools to offer high quality before school, after school, summer programming, as well as preventative and mental health care at the school. The professional development RFP, which I've already mentioned, closes tomorrow. And again, regardless of the responses that the state receives from that RFP, Senator Lockman's asking the budget office and the controller to allow us to use some of the other one-time funds to tailor a better future program with the active involvement of the educator work group and the DOE staff. The remaining funds of that 10 million have to be approved by the state budget office and the controller's office, and they include $1.2 million for the creation of the publicly accessible dashboard of schooling and access and outcome data that was recommended by the social determinants work group with the leadership of Dr. Harrison and Professor Payne. Several $100,000 in additional funding for home visitation programs for pregnant women, infants and toddlers, funds to better advertise the availability of the Teacher Academy programs in Delaware schools, and funds to allow the Department of Education to oversee developmental screening efforts in early childhood facilities. That's a partial list. So that's the list. And just finishing where I started, I'm sure that there is plenty of discussion to be had about the details of all these programs, but we really ought to be extremely pleased with the fact that there are some real programs getting put in place that are going to make a real difference for a lot of real kids this school year. And, we're learning and adjusting as we go. But I just want to thank everybody here for acting with a real sense of urgency and purpose, because these kids deserve it. And I think we've made terrific progress in a very short period of time. So thank you, Senator. And I'm sorry to talk so long.
No, thank you for that explanation. I think it's really helpful and illustrative. I think we've learned a lot through the RFP process. And while it hasn't been perfect, I do appreciate, you've invested a lot of time in shepherding it. So, we've talked a lot in recent meetings about our follow through and, making sure we get things where we want them to be. And I think that we're living that now, and just sort of making sure that we're on the right path with all of these recommendations and certainly with the resources that are flowing for them. So, just, thanks for giving that update on that. And thank you to all the members of the consortium for not hesitating to bring concerns to our attention and giving us the opportunity to course correct when needed. So are there any questions? Do we have any of the members who would like to ask? Yeah, I see Secretary Geisenberger. Hi.
So if I can ask a sort of a 50,000-foot question, which is, you've got the number $10 million. I know that the one-time supplemental listed a number of 7.24. So I'm assuming there must have been 2.75 in the base budget. What's the process for working with DOE and OMB in terms of trying to get something included in the governor's base budget? They'll be hearing, agencies are submitting their budget proposals in the next couple of weeks. There'll be hearings in November. The governor will work on the numbers in December, and something will get proposed in January. I'm just trying to figure out if there is a base number that you need in the ongoing budget to support these programs. Is somebody working on the math of what that is?
Matt, I saw your mouth open. You can feel free to go for it.
Yeah, I mean, there's about $1.2 million of those one-time funds are actually funds that really only need to get spent one time, which is the money that's recommended for the Department of Information Technology for setting up the database. So, just speaking for myself, my hope would be that the remainder of the funds that are currently one time would become part of the operating budget for all the reasons that I just talked about, the importance of predictability and not having this, not having sort of a rolling year by year RFP process, which is not really the right way to do business.
I guess my question is, have we quantified what each program we expect to be the ongoing cost? Because usually you don't budget it as, in the one time I thought it was fine to just have a line that said Reading Commission, but recognizing that, it was still a work in progress. But I would assume to be in the ongoing budget, you would list each program individually for what its ongoing cost would be.
Yeah, and Senator,
is that being worked on? Or?
Yeah, Senator Lockman had made a recommendation to the budget office and the controller's office for specifically allocating the funds that didn't already have a specific allocation in the epilogue. And as I mentioned earlier, I think she's going to be modifying that to allow for this educator work group, project to have this planning process. But so the answer is yes, assuming that her recommendation for those funds is accepted, there will be something that's much more specific.
And that's the existing funds, but I think we do know what the full cost of the line items that were on our wish list are, and what that would have looked like should those have been in the budget proper. So I wouldn't say that we have a specific ask today of what that would look like for the next fiscal year, but we do know what those costs are from the prior work that we did going into securing what we secured for this year.
So, yeah, just my recommendation would be, given how the budget timeline works, if to the extent that these things are in the agency recommendation that will be produced sometime in the next couple of weeks, or can be presented during the hearing for DOE, which will be sometime in November, so that at least it can be considered by the governor prior to submission of his budget.
No, that's helpful. I think we're aware. I don't know that we're quite there, but
Okay.
but it's a helpful flag.
Yeah.
I appreciate.
I mean, while the governor's budget gets introduced in, as Matt knows, while the governor's budget gets introduced in the third week of January, it basically is put to bed pretty much by the middle of December. So.
Yes. Yep, that's where a lot of the footwork that got us here was happening for sure. But so I hope that semi answers your question. I think it's on our
I just want
radar.
to make sure everyone knew the process. So, and the timeline to the extent that you're trying to get stuff in the governor's recommended budget. So.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yeah. What we talk about that people see that comes public in January, that happens now.
Yes.
Essentially. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions or thoughts on that segment? I believe before we move on to our working group updates, we do have quorum. So you were sent the minutes And we now have the opportunity to get that out of the way. And so I'm going to have Kelly or Haley call upon our members and designees to help us get those approved, or whichever method you guys prefer on this one.
Kelly, would you mind? Because I can't look at
Want me to read everybody? Okay.
Or, well, we can
Or do
just,
we just want to have all in favor, put a thumbs up in your screen?
Right, you're gonna have to read fast.
Uh-oh.
Kelly, you can't see me because I'm on my phone, but do we need a motion or just a thumbs up?
We need, actually, you not do a motion a second, and then I'll just go through because it's going to be too much.
Well-
Sorry.
All right, well, I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Do we have a second? Thank you Tika,
Second.
for making the motion.
Second.
Dr. Woods has made a second.
All right. So Senator Lopez. I think I saw him already.
Mark present, voting yes.
Thank you. Representative Smith,
Representative Smith voting yes.
Hugh Brumal, and for Darrell Green,
Yes.
Dr. Reynolds for Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Margie Lopez Waite,
Yes.
Deb Stevens for Stephanie Ingram,
Yes.
Maria Matos,
Yes.
Gwen Angelette for Hanifa,
Hi.
Yes.
Dr. Woods,
Yes.
Noel Picara, I saw Noel.
I said yes. Were you not able to hear me?
Now I can hear you. Yep. Xavier Mills. I'll get it right at some point.
Yes.
Tika Hartsock,
Yes.
Matt Den,
Yes.
Senator Lockman.
Yes.
I think that is everybody, and the minutes are approved. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much for letting us do that. And now we can move on to hear from our active working groups. I think now we have both of the leaders for the educators work group. So we would just give them the opportunity now to take the platform to talk about the status of their work.
Sure. So this is Representative Smith. I'll yield the floor to Noel for most of it. I think Matt kind of already gave an update on where we are for what we're doing. The RFP is due tomorrow. Noel and I did share some frustrations last week with Tizzy and Matt. Feel like we were heard on that regard, and the process that is going to play out with that. We'll see what the RFP comes back with in terms of what that's going to be, and then hopefully we'll get the money approved to kind of go through the deliberate process we kind of intended it to be, to really focus on the educator recruitment and retention piece. We spent a lot of hours, and I know Noel put into it when she could have been putting that time into kids specifically. I don't know, for me, I put into it when I could have been spending it with my kids or constituents. So just want to echo that. I do appreciate all the work that Tizzy and Matt have put into it and understand how things shift from time to time. So I'm going to let Noel say her piece, and we'll see where we are after tomorrow. Thanks, guys.
Noel Picar, I'm a teacher at Coomba Academy. So yeah, thank you for all the work that you put into this. I have to say, I have a different opinion about this. I just want to refocus us on the fact that we need to try to address high needs students now as soon as possible. And from the beginning, I see Dr. Henry is here tonight. We were presented with information about how teacher retention is the largest factor in contributing to student success, which includes literacy, math skills, and that we were shown a lot of hard data about how when teachers leave, it affects students' outcomes. We spent hundreds of hours doing research and putting together our recommendations, which were based around teacher surveys about why they had left, which was about the school climate and administration issues. And we looked at other states and how they had addressed that, and we put together our recommendations. I have not really heard a solid answer about why this recommendation was changed so drastically. I do not agree with the part being changed to being about literacy. Based on the data and the research we did, teacher retention was the biggest factor in determining student literacy. And I really haven't heard a good explanation that the people that we trusted to go in and fight for this really did advocate for our recommendations. You know, like I'm a teacher. I don't often have an opportunity to speak to a group of people like this who have this level of power. I'm not a superintendent. I'm not a politician. And my understanding was that we were brought in as teachers after working very long days with kids because we had the expertise about how to best address their needs. And, you know, we came in day after day doing this, even during the pandemic, after long days of teaching. And it doesn't look to me like our expertise was actually advocated for at that level. I don't agree with Mr. Den that students are really seeing a real benefit from this now, this year, based on where it stands. I don't know about the other recommendations, but from our point of view, with this particular RFP, it's been redirected to a completely different mission than we had recommended. It's not based on the data we collected, and I don't necessarily see this as being beneficial in the way that we thought. This was the highest leverage piece, was the teacher retention. In regard to our other recommendation with Grow Our Own, I see it listed as teacher academies, which I had said over and over again, the teacher academies, although it was a very small part of it, will only have a payoff that's within the next 10 years or so, because we're talking about recruiting students to teacher academies who are in middle and high school, may or may not go into teaching. We're hoping that they do. And then they would have to go through college and become licensed. The main part of the Grow Our Own initiative, and just to remind everybody about this, was that we were going to try to give a more easy and affordable path to licensure for people who wanted to become teachers and administrators who are already working in communities from critical shortage areas, which often means Black and Latinx male teachers. So, you know, this is not trying to advocate for my own mission or anything as far as Ka'umba, but, you know, we have 4 or 5 teachers, Black male professionals at Ka'umba who are not certified, who would be really good candidates for that program. And I'm only saying that because I'm sure in every high needs school that you could also identify those folks who could become certified and be helpful to students now, you know, within a year or two. I don't think that the high leverage parts of our recommendations were fought for. I don't think that the ones that were going to pay off most quickly were fought for. And I really haven't heard a good explanation about why that wasn't addressed. Dealing with it next year is not acceptable to me. The kids are learning now. Kids are coming out of a pandemic now. A child who's 10 years old doesn't have another 10 years to wait for this. And I have to speak for them. So I really appreciate you giving me a platform to say this, because I don't have constituents. I'm not here for my career. I'm only here to speak for the students. And I think this needs to be addressed in writing as soon as possible and corrected. Not next year, not saying that it's going to be addressed at some later date and we're going to have some other funding. This funding needs to be redirected to what we recommended it for. And otherwise, I don't understand why we were called in to spend hundreds of hours doing this and why we advocated for this with the whole consortium. The points that we made were discussed with the consortium. They grilled us on these recommendations. We came back with evidence. This is what the consortium agreed to. And I don't understand how it's so easily by a few people can be redirected into something completely different. I know that your motives are good. I know you're here for the students, but if you put to the side the recommendations of experts who you've called upon to make those, to do something else that's more for political interests, I think that that's a mistake and it's not serving children. So thank you very much for hearing me. I really appreciate you giving me a chance to participate in this group. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Noelle. I appreciate you being very clear about that, and certainly for both of you for bringing that to our attention last week, and you know, just giving us an opportunity to see how we can remedy how things got off track. But thank you for that. And do we have any questions or other comments on the follow through for educators' efforts in particular before we move on to another work group? Hold on, let me see if I see any hands.
I'm sorry, Senator Lockman, I didn't hear your response. I didn't hear the response to Noelle's concerns. I didn't hear your response.
Oh, well, my response is regret that there's a sense that where we landed with the language of the RFA does not keep with the intent, you know, of where the recommendations came from. So that's why we're trying to see to what extent we can redirect things from where they stand now to make sure that we are able to end up with resources going in support of that intent. So it's not a finished story, that's for sure. And we've been having conversations with the department and OMB to that point. So we don't have clear, specific steps on how to correct that, but essentially, I think we, you know, in the process, as Matt described, in the formation of epilogue language, which ultimately fueled the RFP, and I think pulled it off track from a teacher retention focus, which didn't end up being explicitly named in that language, to a literacy focus, is where things went wrong and undermine the intent there. So we're doing what we can to pull that back and fix it and make sure that we're putting an investment into that real intent of the working group.
So are you saying that the RFP is being withdrawn?
No, that request was made. And unfortunately, after we discussed this in our public planning meeting on Friday, and because there had already been submissions that were made and it closes tomorrow, it's not going to be withdrawn. They're going to see what the results are of the submissions that did come in for that. And the department will have the opportunity then to decide whether or not to award or to reissue with modifications. So that is in the hands of the department at this time. And we have had conversations with them about the concerns. They're very aware.
Hi, this is Tika. Can we also place this on the agenda for our next meeting for discussion?
Absolutely.
I have something to add that might be helpful. I heard.
Would you, sorry, Lisa.
To wait, don't I?
To public comment. I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry, I completely forgot. I apologize.
I apologize
so
to you. Hang on, but we will get there.
But you know, Senator, if we let the Department of Education do this, it's not going to happen what Nicole says that it needs to be done. It's like the same old happening again with the same old. And, you know, it's our kids. You know, it's like all this money that came in education to the state. And we're just like, I don't know, echándonos para atrás y no poniendo atención. We're not paying attention. And if we are paying attention like Nicole is, it sounds like she's putting all this time, and I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. It's sad. I'm sad.
I'm with you. It's frustrating and a little confounding. I think we all tried to monitor this throughout the process, and in this particular case of all the RFAs, we dropped the ball. And so that's, you know, I think all that we can say that we tried to review and share that language didn't end up where we needed it to end up. And, you know, our commitment, I think, as we've said repeatedly with the ongoing work and focus of the working groups, is to monitor how these things go from just getting funding secured. And so while it's not necessarily comfortable to find ourselves in a place where we've made a mistake and have to own that and address it, that's where we are. I think because we are paying attention and because we are a body that's made up of people who are paying attention and holding us accountable for steering things the way that we committed to steer them. So while it's frustrating, I think there's some silver lining in that we're having this conversation.
Well, the silver lining would be if we pull it back and say, no, this is not what
Yes.
we requested. We
Yes.
don't want this, we don't want this money to be spent this way. We want the money to be spent the way hardworking people put together a proposal. I mean, we can pull it back, or are we worthless? Are we just rubber stamping?
Well,
I mean, it's enough. Our kids are in danger. I know kids that, I mean, we say we're talking a good game, but we're not playing a good game. And it's sad because it's our Black and brown kids, poor kids, not kids that have resources, poor kids.
Yeah.
So pull it. You got pull.
Thank you.
You got pull it.
Well, we're going to continue to work
pull
on
the
that.
RFP and then rewrite it and send it out. Show that we got power. If not, what good are we?
Okay.
That's all I'm gonna say.
No, thank you. That's appreciated. And did we have anyone else who wanted to comment? Okay. All right. So obviously there will be more updates on that, to Tika's point. Of course, with all of our meetings, we have updates, but in our planning sessions as well, we do address some of these items in an ongoing fashion. So we will move on to the social determinants work group. I believe, do we have the co-chair, one of the co-chairs here to report, or?
I think I saw
I
Ray.
see you, Ray. It just popped up in my list.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to give a very high level report. And the details around monitoring of the implementations will be provided by co-chair Reading Consortium co-chair Matt Den, who works very closely with the social determinants work group. So we reconstituted our meeting schedule in September. Very high level conversation around the composition of the social determinants work group and our focus and our priority at monitoring and activating around the implementation of the recommendations that emerged from the social determinants work group. And for this next cycle, honing in on middle school and high school, the needs of middle and high school students. I'm hearing from those educators that are closest on the ground in terms of proximity, and parents are working with them so that we can start to identify where the gaps are and how the social determinants work group can start to formulate a plan of action targeted to middle and high school students. Our initial set of recommendations are focused on early learning and elementary school. We also will be adding parents and students to our work group. I mean, they are there as parents, but they're not there with the voice of parents intentionally. So we want to make certain that engagement, collaboration, and sharing and secondary education are our priorities for this streams of work that we will be focusing in on. Matt, do you want to add any detail?
No, I think it was covered. I ran through a lot of it at the very beginning of the meeting. So I think in terms of.
I'm sorry. I apologize. I was a moderator for University of Delaware seminar tonight, so I'm arriving obviously late.
I think we got the rest of it right. Thanks.
Okay.
Any questions or comments? Okay, I don't think I see any hands.
Hi, Chuck Longfellow, CFO, Christina School District, co-chair of Settlement Work Group. My other co-chair, CEO of Eastside Charter School, Aaron Bass, could not make it tonight. Just to report out on what Settlement's working on is we are thankful that some bills were signed into law and that funding is flowing. Some of our priorities for the group this year include, as we always do, monitoring the settlement items. The increases in opportunity funding, things around that, teacher recruitment and retention programs, how they shape out, and the ombudsperson program. Part of monitoring that is our group has been talking about how some of the things seem to be just kind of checkbox items, or that it seems to be like, hey, look, the box got checked, we're done yet. So we're thinking about, maybe going a little step deeper and maybe coming up with some kind of a rubric and classification system around implementation, outcome, and impact. We need to talk about that with the broader group. That's just kind of Aaron and I at this point talking about that. But I think we're going to talk about that with our broader group and then maybe come up with something to recommend to this group. But I think that we need to get beyond just checking a box. Also, we would like to kind of echo what Noel Picaro from Coumba was talking about, where we got a lot of expertise in these groups, and our group in particular has a lot of expertise. And so as these RFPs, as the scopes of work are developed, we're not saying you got to consult with us, we're a gatekeeper, anything like that, but we have a lot of expertise and can help maybe shape some of that stuff before it goes out, maybe, make things go a little more smoothly. So we want to just offer that as well. One particular thing that's, I want to say it's a little painful, is watching the Ombuds Office program get off the ground. It did go out for RFP and then it went back out. I don't know if that closed yet or not, but that's something that I know we're watching. We have a couple members who are very passionate about the Ombuds Office. And so we hope we get something really good out of that. I don't know if we've mentioned it at this meeting, but we mentioned it somewhere that, we're not sure that that's funded to the level it needs to be in order to be an effective ombuds office, but we got our eyes open on it and we want to see how it comes out. On the horizon, the independent funding assessment RFP. So there's another one coming down that we hope it doesn't just pop up on mymarketplace.delaware.gov someday and then we get a text, hey, the RFP's out. We are collecting ideas. We're talking about this particular piece of the settlement in our meetings. If you want to join that conversation, come on by. We're sending stuff up that we hope can be considered or included. And every month that we meet, we talk about in depth the funding assessment. What's it going to look like? We don't know. Is it going to come out to something that's Kerwin-like in Maryland? We don't know. So, but it's definitely a concern of ours to do that right. So next slide, please. All right. Any questions there? I'm just making sure I hit all my stuff here. Yep, I think I did.
Okay, thank you, Chuck,
Thank
as
you.
always. Ray and Matt, thank you on the prior one. I don't see any questions at this time, but certainly, continues to be a lot of good work. And yes, to your point, I think we are getting a crash course in the rocky road of RFPs this year between the ombudsman, between the professional development one, and learning a lot that hopefully can apply to continuously, and soon doing better. So thank you for that. And I believe next slide. Do we have an update? Is Representative Chukwucha with us? Okay. We were going to get sort of a concluding update. It would have been very brief, so I'm happy to step in here just momentarily. He could speak to it more thoroughly than I, but so as we know, we are sunsetting the specific funding and governance work group that was chaired by Representative Chukwucha and Eugene Young, who now no longer sits on Reading, no longer being in his role as Metropolitan Wilmington Urban League's CEO. And So a new group will be forming to solely focus on governance as it impacts Wilmington schools. I think very fair to say, have a more robust refocus on redistricting, which of course was something that we essentially had to leave on the back burner with the shifts and challenges of the pandemic. So hopefully we'll have more to hear from Representative Chicocha on that in our next full body meeting. Any questions?
Hi, this is
Secretary Geisenberger.
This is
Go
Rick
ahead.
Geisenberger again. So I think financing issues come under governance. Maybe it came under Chuck's thing. I wasn't sure when to mention it, but I do think one important development that probably everybody knows about, but it's important for people to hear again, is that that reassessment is moving forward over the course of the summer. There's about 480,000 properties in the state that need to be reassessed as part of this process. All 3 counties have now signed contracts, actually with the same company, which makes it a lot more efficient. I think the total cost with that contractor is $28 million. It was actually a little bit less than I think what we thought it would cost. I think we thought it was going to be closer to 35 to 40 million. So anyway, they've signed contracts for totaling all 3 counties, $28 million with this firm. I think that even based on the emails and calls that my department is already getting, the school districts are going to get inundated with phone calls about what reassessment means and what it doesn't mean. And there's an awful lot of confusion out there. And I do think it may be something this committee wants to discuss, how we can maybe ease some of the concerns that people have about what reassessment means. In the long run, it means, fairer taxation relative to the value of your property versus looking back 30 or 40 years at what the value of your property was. Obviously, there, as you know, there's a piece of legislation that doesn't just propose that there be reassessment, but that would require it every 5 years. That would also address a lot of issues around school funding were it to pass. But the initial reassessment, I think a lot of people think my property is going to be reassessed and it's going to have doubled in value, and therefore my taxes are going to double. That's the kind of questions we're getting. And that's not true at all. If your property increased by 6 times, and on average in the county, your property values only increased by 3 times, that person whose value increases 6 times probably would see a tax increase. The person whose value only increased 2 times might see a tax decrease. If you're at the average, you're going to increase by the average. But we're already getting a lot of questions, so I just thought I'd bring it up to this committee, and maybe we can have a role in helping to communicate to people that they should just be patient and wait and let the process occur. But that try to educate people that that not, there's going to be very few properties in the state whose assessed value has not increased since 1974 or since 1987. The question is, how did it increase relative to all the other properties in their county? And, to the extent any of you can help answer those questions with people, that'd be a great thing, because there is a lot of concern out there.
Thank you. No, that's a great point, and certainly a big elephant in the room, and one that definitely lies underneath a lot of the conversations we'll be wanting to bring forward and in the coming months to year or so. So I appreciate that, and I'm sure Haley and Kelly are noting that, so we can make sure we figure out where it best fits into the work plan, and particularly with the change in the funding and governance transitioning its mission.
But the good news is it's moving along, and each of the counties was able to fund it. So,
yeah.
Without having to pass tax increases to be able to fund it. And
right. I think it's great news. I know, in education policy circles, it's been on the hoped for list of things to happen to unlock a lot of other things. And so definitely a positive development. I think Hanifa Shabazz has joined us. I can't imagine there's another Hanifa, so she's got her hand raised. And Hanifa, did you want to comment?
Well, I just had a question and thank you.
Welcome, by the way.
I'm new to the
Welcome.
group. Yes. And on the agenda, and I know State Rep Tuotra is not there, but he said something in reference to Wilmington focus. Can you give me and elaborate a little bit on what that point was?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. So essentially, we had a funding and governance group that was initially charged in part with its sort of work plan to look at issues of governance and specifically district lines and things like that in northern Newcastle County, and specifically with Wilmington. Was Wilmington is concerned, and the impact in particular on Wilmington students, struggling to find success in the school system. And so that group sidelined its redistricting work when the pandemic began. And now Representative Chipocha, who's always been at the helm of that effort, is essentially establishing a new work group to renew that body, and also to make sure that the membership of that group is familiar with Wilmington issues, and giving a stronger voice to Wilmington leaders to really guide that conversation as well. So he'll be back, I think, at our next meeting, I hope, to talk a little bit more about the progress that he's making, but that's really what that means. So it's really about focusing on Wilmington students with Wilmington voices at the table, in particular, to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. And I just muted myself. Any other questions about other funding and governance issues in process? Okay. I think we can move to the next slide. All right. I had a feeling that even though we have some big stuff to cover tonight, we'd be quicker than our usual. But at this time, we would invite folks interested in making public comment to raise their hands and offer their thoughts. We do have our 3-minute limit for public comments, and we will just look for hands or other signals. I see a physical hand. I see Lisa, you got yours up first. And I know Hanifa, your hand was up for being a member. So, and I don't see any others at this time. And so Lisa, I would invite you, and Amy. Okay, so first, Lisa, I'd invite you to take your 3 minutes. Welcome, and have your say.
Okay, thank you, Senator, so much for the time. My name is Lisa, and I'm here to represent Works of Woody, nonprofit that I started, to be a voice for the disabled population. I wanted to add that I heard Mr. Den speak about evidence-based programs that he recommended. And when we're talking about the professional development and literacy being something that got in the way, per se. I wanted to say that through research, we found that children read more for a volunteer or, I'm sorry, I'm so nervous, or an assistant more than they do a teacher. And we have approved case study analysis with the data necessary to support this. We have local programs through therapeutic writing centers that have virtual programs that there have already been in schools in Delaware. They have evidence-based programs for literacy with horses, and they use the students' Chromebooks. So I thought maybe if we approached it with a solution, I'm saying we, I just thought if you approach with a solution, a possible solution for the literacy, then maybe you could get back onto track with what you want. I also wanted to ask, because I really don't know, if adults with disabilities is included in this, because I don't know if they were actually included in the lawsuit. So that's an honest question. I was wanted them to be included in any staffing and the training of staff, the group homes. And I think that's it. That was easy.
Thank you, Lisa. No need to be nervous with us. And now Amy Solomon, I'd like to unmute and offer your comment as well. Welcome. Good to see you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, nice and clear.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm here at PS DuPont Middle School, where my son swims with the Delaware swim team. And as someone who tried to kind of tune in to the Reading Consortium throughout your process, it feels great that you're at the stage you are, and I want to thank everyone because you know, I think it is better than what has come before it, but the discord I've heard on this call makes me extremely sad, because I think it reflects the dysfunction in the system. I think it's pretty unavoidable. I would like to know where the power lever is. I would like to know who changed the language. I think that should be transparent and public knowledge because everyone here has jobs, and whoever did it should be proud of that work and defend it. Because Noel's team did work a year extensively. It was pretty much the only thing the Reading Consortium was doing initially. And in my own investigations, it's the DOE and the University of Delaware who block progressive RFP processes. So that's my guess. And it's a real problem. And then it's backed up by the governor's office, and no one's willing to call out the dysfunction and change it. And I don't think you can go on as business as usual. You know, you would be my comment. I think it's wonderful that the tax reassessment is going ahead and at that price point, but you know, we don't have a transparent pipeline of capital projects that have been, you know, disregarded for those 30 years that we weren't reassessing. And if the legislature does not change the code and we can't increase the taxes on people paying criminally low taxes, we are doing a disservice to our students as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Amy, very much. Okay, do we have anyone else who would like to raise their hand or signal in video that they'd like to speak? Oh, Dean Henry, welcome, good to see you, and you're welcome to speak.
Thank you, Senator Lockman. I really appreciate this opportunity, and I just want to say that I share the concerns that Noel expressed and Mike expressed earlier. I can recite from my own experience meeting with a state board who had enacted a program that looks very similar to the one in the RFP after it had run for 2 years, and that the board member who was very well-intentioned, but the program was not implemented the way it was supposed to be implemented, looked at me and said, I always thought doing something would be better than doing nothing. But teacher turnover went up by 22% in the on average in the 75 schools receiving that. So I'm not saying that necessarily will happen, but student learning gains went down, and student and teacher turnover, which is exactly to Noel's point, the high leverage focus of this kind of work. I just want to say that sometimes doing something and getting the money is not better than doing something intentionally, planfully, with an evidence base that shows it can work. And I also want to say that as the former speaker has indicated some sort of relationship with University of Delaware, I think I'd be the person that had that, and we had no input whatsoever on the RFPs if anyone was thinking that might have occurred. I don't. Those are all done by the DOE and done to their specifications. Let me say one other thing, if I could. I really think we had a very civil, low heat discussion, which is what these groups should be doing. So I admire the comments all the way around, and I'm not at all upset by these comments. I think this is what we do in a democracy, is we talk in a civil tone to each other. We state our disagreements, and we don't perseverate and try to call names about individuals in that process. So I thought it was a model for what civic discourse should look like. Maybe we can talk longer about it, but I just wanted to say that I think everybody, the whole discourse was handled extremely well for these kinds of deliberative bodies. And I just wanted to be clear and compliment you and Matt and Mike and Noel on the type of discourse and all the folks who chimed in and what I read in the chat.
Thank you, Dean Henry. It's certainly appreciated. And again, we'll continue the dialogue for sure through planning and future full body meetings, and in between that time as well. So do we have any other public comment at this time? All right, seeing none. Thank you, big exclamation point from Haley. If you have any questions or follow-up concerns, Haley's the best person to email. She will see it and get it to in front of us the fastest. Of course, check out our website, Facebook, and YouTube, and we will, of course, continue the work. So thank you for being with us tonight. Thank you, everyone, for being straightforward and just sticking with us. We really do appreciate all of your expertise and presence. So we'll keep working to make that clear and bring our ideas to fruition. And with that, I think we can call it a night.
Do we need a motion to adjourn?
We should go for it, Representative.
All right, motion to adjourn.
We have a second? All right. If you're in favor of that, you can just sign off. All right, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye, thanks.
Good night.